Buenas noches, buenas and half a day. We are back in emergency session, the Committee of the Whole. Thank you, colleagues, and the panel as well for being here. At this time, because there have been developments since we recessed last night, I'd like to defer to the Superintendent of the Guam Department of Education to provide the body with an update on the progress that has happened since yesterday. Superintendent Swanson.
Thank you, Senator. Since yesterday, we've completed some inspections and started new ones today. But I'm looking at the possibility of attacking the issues and the questions at hand through three different veins. Primarily, first of all, to resolve any issues could challenge actual safety on a campus, and starting with our uninspected campuses first. But we will go through all of them before we're finished. First of all, I'd like to comment that I know I was asked yesterday about whether or not I would support the amendment, and I would not as written. However, if looking at the first section, Section 2, the authorization to operate down to schools may operate until inspection is complete, period. Strike the rest of the document. That is assuming doing what we're doing before the schools open, which is focus on the safety issues that the Attorney General mentioned to be a particular liability, because we want to be sure that we either remove or cordon those off so that there's no chance of any student engaging or adult on the campus engaging an area that could be dangerous to them. To do that, we're also willing to propose that it may be necessary to delay the open the school one full pay period further, which would cause the school to open on the 22nd or 23rd of August. That entails an added cost for all of the teaching staff that are on the school calendar. So we're getting that number together, and if we, at the very least, we need to provide that and consider it in the budget debate that's coming up later this month, so that we know that that expense is there. At the same time, and that's the legislative support that I look for, and then the board has been in touch with his administration, and we're looking at an emergency declaration so that we can accelerate procurement, and that will help us augment our manpower to go through and inspect and repair schools before they're inspected. So the emergency procurement that we would propose to do involves three primary areas that cause difficulty on inspections, and those have to do with restrooms, lighting, and air conditioning. While we have contracts in place already in these, they don't encompass all the areas of need because those needs were identified later after Marwar. So that's the area of focus that we would work with. With the currently before considering the moving a start of school from the 15th, we are having our maintenance teams do an inspection of each of the schools that have yet to be inspected by public health, and identify, and if not, and possibly even repair or make sure that areas that are in variances are cordoned off and meet the standard for public health, so that when their inspectors come, there is not an issue, and further, there is not an issue of safety for students or staff. So even though we have a preliminary evaluation from each of the principals, we want to go back and put eyes on it and check it and make sure that it is in fact safe. If it looks as though we'll need more, my effort is to get that done so we can continue with the language that's in the bill and conduct inspections as we call, and the list that was provided to you is the list we're following. For example, today the inspection at Estumbo Middle School started. That was the next school in the list, and we'll continue to follow that sequence. And so that the other support that we would ask from the administration is in the use of the emergency procurement process and the rules around that. There are two projects that are with GSA, and that's the mold abatement project that you've already funded and the fence project. So we would ask them to include those two projects in that work so that they could begin working immediately. The baseline work with all of the procurement documents is already complete. That would just accelerate it and move it forward more quickly. And that's all.
Thank you, Superintendent. Colleagues, we're on the first round of questions for the panel. You each have 10 minutes, not including responses. And yesterday we concluded with Senator Guåhan. So we'll start this morning with Speaker Terlahi. Speaker, you're recognized.
Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Superintendent, and to all of GDOE and all of those of GDOE teachers who are listening, I'm sure. Thank you for all your work. Thank you for the updates, and let's just keep going and try to make this work. I appreciate the consistent line of that we've had, I guess, in the last few days, including last week, that we want the schools to be safe. We want them to be open. I think we all agree. We're looking for every way that we can do that. So use of emergency power, procurement issues, I agree with that. It's unfortunate maybe that we didn't use that earlier. I think that's always been available. I want to ask the Attorney General, since we talked about it a little bit yesterday. I have a million questions, but one is emergency procurement has a limit.
That is, I have to recheck that, Madam Speaker. Emergency procurement normally, I think, does have a limit, but I don't have the statute in front of me of what that limit might be.
All right, because you had suggested direct procurement, and we had previously authorized, because of this happening last year, small purchase, an increase in small purchase authority. But I wonder if the emergency procurement has a limit, if we need to just waive that limit towards the opening of schools.
Madam Speaker, with the superintendent, he can probably describe exactly the types of procurements they're looking at in order for the legislature to consider what type of exemption it might have for only this purpose for this period of time. As I mentioned, the AG's office can stand by to do verifications that the emergency procurement procedures that are already in place would be followed. I think we were talking about, I spoke with some senators about a sunset provision also for periods of time, unless the legislature were to renew the authorization, that it would lapse at a certain period of time. Reports to be issued to the legislature for purposes of reviewing what type of purchases were being done. So yes, certain safeguards could be built in, and for this emergency situation, you probably, if you passed a bill, would want to consider those sorts of parameters and safeguards. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Superintendent, are you looking at a limit of emergency procurement that you can work with, or that needs to be lifted?
It's been suggested to me to $1 million per school.
And you have that authority?
My board has not acted on that yet, but that was where the suggestion came from.
If the board acts, you have that authority?
Yes.
All right. Okay. If not, let us know. I don't mind putting an amendment to this bill that says we waive the procurement or we lift the caps, if there are any, on emergency procurement. So I know that it was suggested that the governor declare an emergency. I think we just suggested that last week. It was also suggested yesterday by the Vice Speaker. The governor was on the radio this morning saying she doesn't need to do that, that procurement can be waived by GDOE, that the legislature can waive procurement, and pretty much said that she has no role in this, except for if you give her a list of things to do, like former Speaker Wampat said. So I wanted to follow up. We did provide in previous measures, particularly Public Law 37-4, we said that the governor and public health could bring in additional inspectors from other agencies that could be trained to do these inspections so that there would be no delay in inspections. We said in Public Law 3733 that the hiring of personnel, retired personnel, that was at least a year ago, all these measures. There was another one that said that the procurement, that the small purchase limits would be increased for GDOE. All of those have expired now, but did GDOE use any of those?
Yes, ma'am, we did use the procurement ceiling increase. And we tried to recruit retired labor, and the folks that we interviewed actually said that they probably couldn't pass the drug test, so they didn't want to come back to work.
All right, well, that's different than what Mr. Pangilinan said yesterday. He said we couldn't bring on the retirees because they would be taking away classified jobs or in those positions, but I can't understand why we can't add additional positions that we need right now.
When I was following that process, that was the comment that I got back, because we had approached several recent retirees, and they decided against it.
All right, Mr. Pangilinan?
Yes, Senator, what I said was, according to our HR, they told me that if there was an open position, we can recruit a retiree, but if it was open, one of my guys applied for the same position, so I promoted within.
Right. So do you hear that, Mr. Superintendent? That's what he said yesterday, that we can't hire the retirees because they're competing for positions with classified employees, but I don't think that was the intent at all.
No, I know that was not the intent.
So is there a way around that?
Yes.
Right? I see these other agency heads. Director Arreola, Public Health, we give them the same authority to hire retirees. When you hire your retirees, are they competing with classified employees, or are you just bringing them on in addition?
We bring them on as LTAs.
Yes.
So a quick, because we need them. With regards to inspectors, retirees being brought in, we did take advantage of that. And unfortunately, I guess because they're retired, there's reasons for their retirement. As soon as we brought them on board, which was also a process, 2 months they left for personal reasons. So I guess that's kind of the challenge we have with bringing on retirees. They have a mindset of being retired, and unless they really want to come back to work. But we're trying.
All right. I know we brought in retired GPD personnel as well, gave them some kind of bonus to do that when we needed it. We gave the governor this may transfer personnel and other resources from, but not limited to, Department of Public Works to assist with preparing procurement-related scope of work prep, repairs, or other actions deemed necessary to obtain GDOE school compliance with sanitary permit requirements. May use unaudited surplus revenues from FY23 to assist with the procurement and compliance efforts. And then we gave them the authority to detail inspectors from the Department of Public Works, EPA, Guam Fire Department, or other agencies who can be trained by DPHSS to assist environmental health inspectors. Was that ever used?
Not that I'm aware of. However, if I can, since you brought up the topic about training, we do a lot of training with the administrators of DOE, the principals and their maintenance crew. So they have our checklist, and so their self-assessment is based on that.
I know. That's not the question. The question is, did we bring in any from any other agencies to assist the Department of Public Health to conduct these inspections?
Not that I'm aware of. So.
All right. So now you have said in your press release that you're going to continue with inspections. You're going to do your job. The mandate is to inspect the schools before they open in order for them to get a sanitary permit, or they don't get a sanitary permit. Is that right? No sanitary permit without an inspection?
Correct. That's correct, because the current law.
All right, and so, but then, in another part of our discussion yesterday, I thought I heard you say, Director, that you have so many other entities to inspect that that would be unreasonable for you to inspect these schools prior to opening date. Can we get your assurance that if DOE is ready, we're going to get these schools inspected?
They will be inspected. The
Thank you.
process will get inspected.
Thank you.
Whether they pass or not is a different issue.
Sure.
Yeah, but they will be inspected.
All
Now-
right.
Yep.
And so, Mr. Attorney General, could you please clarify, if the schools don't get inspected, do they still have a sanitary permit?
My understanding of the statute is that the sanitary permits are only good for 1 year. The schools must be inspected physically, otherwise the government should not be issuing sanitary permits for them. So is that my understanding, Madam Speaker, of your question? It's whether or not the sanitary permits have been, whether schools have been inspected and a sanitary permit has been issued is a factual question.
Well, yes. Do the schools that have not been inspected have sanitary permits last year?
I don't know the exact count.
Public Health could answer that.
Good morning, Speaker. The schools that were operating last year under Public Law 3732 did not have sanitary permits. It's only the schools that we inspected that passed inspection where a sanitary permit was issued.
All right. Yeah, I was curious about that. So they don't even have a sanitary permit, let alone one with waived requirements or anything like that. Okay. What is the status? GDOE reported that they applied for variances in the last few days and what is the status of their application?
I did receive a letter and a 5-inch binder of variances, various variances. It's still under review. And so I will have an official response probably before the end of the week.
All right, so it was your assurance, Mr. Superintendent, that all schools waiting to be inspected have submitted variances where you outline your mitigation plan to keep that they are safe. In other words, you're showing us that, as you've said earlier, that they are safe and you're showing those plans to public health.
That's correct.
All right. You said you would get to them in the next few days? Is that what I heard?
Yes, I received it at the end of the day on Tuesday.
Okay.
And I have not had a chance to review it with my staff. But it's been under review
All
and
right.
advisement.
And if all the variances were granted, can the schools open?
No.
Why not?
Because there's a difference between an exception to the rule and an exemption of a complete non-inspection. The variances are tied to the regulation, so it's an exception to the rule. And those variances came from DOE, I'm sure in good faith, doing their own self-assessment, but we have not gone into the schools. So we don't know if those are all the demerits that might be coming down.
All right.
But I'm sure they did their due diligence and chose the big things that are obvious.
Yes, so they would still have to be inspected and they'd still have to get less than 41 demerits.
Correct.
All right. And you think, Mr. Superintendent, that with the variances you submitted, that your schools would receive less than 41 demerits if those variances were granted?
That's the intent and the design. As I said before, we're going to be going back out and verifying physically on each campus in the next several days.
All right. And I'm glad that you clarified this morning that you want that last sentence of this bill removed. We tried to remove that. The last time we were here, we got a lot of pushback on removing whether a failed school could continue to open with your discretion. So I'm glad that you're making it very clear. You don't want that discretion. You want that sentence removed.
That's correct.
Thank you. If You did say, however, yesterday that if a school during the school year is inspected and fails, or, yeah, that it would be closed. And that's what happened last year during the school year. It would be closed and it would be fixed. And you said that was actually effective at getting attention to the schools. Whose attention was it effective at getting?
I would just say this, that because of history, some of our principals weren't as sensitive as to the urgency of this, and when the inspectors came, there was some basic housekeeping that they could have done very easily that caused them not to pass, and everybody's lived and learned from that experience.
Thank you. And so yesterday there was a suggestion that the legislature perhaps could delineate, take out some of the rules and say, we don't really need those. Schools are safe without those rules. We passed those rules, or those rules were passed by the AAA because of the recommendation of Public Health. Has Public Health made a list of rules that we don't need anymore, or that you think we could waive and the schools would be safe without those rules?
No, ma'am. We have not gone through that, and we are not deviating. Those regulations are still in place and very much according to standard.
What if we waived, as was suggested, all aircon? Is that safe?
So our regulation doesn't require air conditioners. Our regulation requires the classroom to meet a certain temperature, humidity level, and ventilation. So it's not about air conditioning. It's about if you're able to achieve those types of temperatures, because if you don't, on one end, it isn't a prime environment for a child to learn, even though some of us have actually been in classrooms that way growing up. We have a different generation now. But the second thing is that that is our way of indirectly having the schools in compliance and the classrooms in compliance to mitigate the potential for mold to grow. And so we don't cite for mold directly, but we do based on the paint that you could see in our regulation, as well as the ventilation, the humidity, temperature requirements.
I think the legislature should not be in the business of deciding what is safe and what is not safe. And if Public Health can't make that list for us, then I can't see how that's going to happen. But even the governor on the radio this morning was throwing that out as a solution, kind of like, you know, some of the tiles, the Public Health is citing for tiles or lighting, and Public Health continues to say those are required.
Speaker, we have other categories of permitted establishments or health regulated establishments wherein we have a critical violations risk. And if you think about it based on our demerits checklist, higher ticketed demerited items are in fact tied into a higher potential health hazard or potential risk. And we can go based on that, but at the same token, everything is related to each other. So, for example, the trash cans with lids that everybody was up in arms over last year. Well, if you don't have someone taking out those emptying them out those garbage cans every day, and you're allowed to put food in there, you run the risk of creating an environment ripe for vector, ripe for roaches, ants, and potentially rodents. And so there is a correlation in our regulations. They holistically work together. It's not a cherry picking situation. And I suppose if your ceiling tiles aren't in disrepair, which we have gotten some variance requests for that, we've gotten variance requests for broken tiles. If we look, we can't determine based on what's written in the variance to see if it's feasible, because every campus is different. And every mitigation plan might not work for, one standard mitigation plan might not work for the entire schools they're asking variances for, which is why we need to see on site for all those 18 schools if all the variances submitted are even feasible. And at that point, we also still need to inspect as required by Public Law 37-4 before we even issue a permit to operate.
All right, so it looks to me like that's the plan, though. So we need those variances to be reviewed, perhaps approved. We do need the inspections because they are going to be contracting work per school, and we all need to do this together. All right, so I'm thinking if we can't waive a rule and say that a place is safe, because that's not the reality of the situation, that we could not make a law to do the same either, right? In this law, say these things are safe. No aircon is safe. We waive all aircon requirements. We waive all lighting requirements or anything like that. I mean, does public health condone anything like that by the legislature? And with the AG, is that what you were suggesting yesterday that the Guam legislature is going to do?
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, can you repeat your question?
If we can't waive rules, can we by law say all aircon requirements for schools shall be waived for this fiscal year or this school year? Is that safe? And I think your answer was no.
No, and I think maybe the AG can answer that because that's a legal question.
Yeah, if the AG, we'll get back to him.
Actually, Speaker, can I just put one more anecdote
Sure.
with that? I don't know if the legislature has any power to restrict the air conditioning requirement, but I view Public Law 3732 as that was an exemption, basically allowing them to continue to operate. So the legislature did have that power and did authorize that.
And Mr. Attorney General, we were discussing your suggestion yesterday that we could separate the laws. Some are vital, some are not, or the rules. I don't see how we can do that. We are not the safety experts, and I think that would be very negligent of us to say we don't need air cons as a general principle,
Well,
when we've already said by other laws we need certain temperatures.
Madam Speaker, I would respectfully disagree. The legislature has the experts, uses the experts for purposes of deciding what is dangerous, what is not dangerous, and that is the purpose of the legislature, to set those rules. That's what we're operating out of today. So my suggestion was simply, because of the triage emergency situation that we're in, the intent that we want to open the schools and balance that against the danger of putting kids in unsafe conditions, that the AG's office's recommendation includes creating a list based upon the expert advice that we have in front of us to decide what is dangerous, what is not dangerous, and then open schools based upon that. If it's not dangerous, don't keep the schools closed. If it's dangerous, get it fixed. So inspect, decide what is dangerous, and then get it fixed, and then open the schools would be the parameters. Madam Speaker, since yesterday I've spoken with my staff here, and this idea of getting, not only the waiver of the procurement, but having a receiver. The courts...
I'm not talking about receiver.
Well,
I am not discussing that. That was some other senator's idea, and I frankly
Right.
don't want to discuss
So,
that. That's not an option
in response
as
to your
far as I
question,
am concerned.
You are the proper authority to decide safety. That's the bottom line, not these people up front. What is Guam law is set by the legislature. The public policy and the rules and regs are set by you, not these people.
Yeah, I know there's been a suggestion that we waive the 7 points or the adequate education law, that we rebunk that we take away the rules and regs that we've put in place through great effort to make sure the schools are safe. I just don't agree with that. I think we are capable of fixing these schools, and GDOE has shown that they can do it. They need more time, or they need more help. And I am for they need more help. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Duenas, you're recognized.
Sidus Masi, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the panel. I want to start with a few comments because I have very few questions. I think we've been here for almost 5.5, 6 days now planning the plan with the government, but I think it has been an absolutely necessary, vital, and productive exercise. I think this is one of the highest and best uses of our time in the legislature, as arduous and difficult as it may be from time to time, to put the attention where it needs to be and show the people what's actually transpiring. So with that, I want to start with a comment and a question for those who are, I'm sure more and more people are paying attention to this process because of the attention that it's well deserved to get our kids to school and to move forward. Mr. Swanson, Superintendent, I heard that you are now saying that an additional week is to be added. Is that for the whole school system?
If we do that, my proposal is it would be for all schools.
Okay. I just think that communication is king, and
One pay period, 2 weeks.
people rest on your word, because it's your word that's go, no go, although we are playing a role here. So let's get that information out post haste if that's the case, okay?
That'll be decided today.
Beautiful. So people of Guam today, you'll know, parents, teachers, employers, please bear with what some of your parents may be going through, and we'll get through this together. But if that decision's made today, at least people can start talking about it, and people who are watching can circulate that information as a possibility.
And at this time, the start date is the 15th.
Okay, very good clarification. Thank you. I want to also start by saying this is a repetition from my opening on the discussion of the bill originally, and I want to start by saying that despite some of our discussions back and forth, it's my observation, and I want the people of Guam to know that this is a whole new system than 16 months ago when we first started debating what the requirements will be to our schools and what will be accepted and not accepted in terms of sanitary permits. I want to allow two people to once again show the people of Guam what the efforts have been to date, why they've gotten the 21 schools done, and why the pending schools are well on their way, aside from those that are requiring massive renovation. Dr. Damas, can you tell the people of Guam once again, particularly your standing weekly meeting on updates and your continued dialogue and conversation with public health on where you're at and the status of self-inspections and inspections?
Good morning, and thank you, Senator. Every Tuesday, our School Readiness Task Force meets so that we could take a look at our proposed schedule of inspections. We know which facilities and maintenance team members are assigned to those schools so that they can already start prepping. Sometimes the prep work is, we plan for 3 to 4 weeks, but then sometimes it turns out to be in one case, 3 months because of the extent needed to get the school ready. While that's taking place, the main player in the School Readiness Task Force communicating with public health on a weekly basis is Chris Anderson, our administrator for Student Support Services Division. And he updates Francine. We get advice on how much more time is needed at a school or where the inspectors are. Is this a variance, a possibility? So there's a lot of dialogue so that we can communicate that with the facilities and maintenance team. And at the same time, at the school level, we have the staff, more so the staff who are taking care of those the common areas. We've also had our teachers do what they can in the classroom because they need to make sure that their classrooms are organized. They need to make sure that there's no food that's exposed or left in the desk drawers, that there's no air fresheners because of allergies that might affect the breathing of our students who have allergies or asthma. So there's a lot of interaction and collaboration and responsibility on everybody's part. During the summer, our staff is doing what they can to get the schools ready. So nobody has really been sitting around doing nothing. We have the staff of the schools that are waiting their annual inspection. They've been prepping their campuses. They've been reporting through our Munis system, our electronic system, what the issues are at the school. It goes to facilities and maintenance so that they have a running list of what are the things that are needed. We have the connection with our DFAS, our Deputy Superintendent for Finance, ensuring that we can identify the funding for these items that are needed. And then when the inspection happens, and believe it or not, we've had inspections take place while our classes are in session. So for Agada, for example, their inspection took place the last month of school, May. It took 3 to 4 weeks to get that school inspected. And I even told the principal, get the word out to the parents, talk to your students, tell them to stop flushing rolls of toilet paper down the toilets, because even students have a role to play in ensuring a safe and clean campus. So a lot of collaboration, and we've had a proposed schedule posted on our website. It's been there. It's been there as when I came on board in this position in March. The School Readiness Task Force had already been meeting, gosh, since August, September, even prior to that. So I could even see where we are with the proposed schedule. When we came here for the oversight hearings, that information was still posted, it was fluid, because then it got to the point where we were like, okay, guys, we really need to try to look at our schedule to see which schools are able to be front-loaded so that we can target on, like, for example, Stumbo Middle School, we want to get them out of the double session with Benevente Middle School. And when we had the maintenance company, because it's a lease school, when we had them on board to fix the air cons, we supplemented that with the additional air cons that were needed. We had our facilities and maintenance guys there doing what they could, and today they're getting inspected. We have confidence that this school will do well because it's been a progress over several weeks to get the schools ready. Now we're at the Tier 3, and because we left off the school year in May with all these campuses opened, 3 months later, I'm sure people will say that the schools are cleaner because our staff and our facilities and maintenance team have been preparing the schools, A, for the start of the school year, and B, for the upcoming inspections. And so it's been ongoing. Never once did we come here and say, Senators, please pass Public Law Bill 317 because we need more time. Never did we say we're going to just slack off. No, our punch list actually was pushed forward because we knew the pressure to get the schools inspected. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Damas. And once again, I'll reiterate to the superintendent, I've asked him to strongly issue a directive that this is a standing order until we get out of this situation where now the routine inspections are done because we've got the plan in place and he's agreed to do that. Dr. Damas, has to be an invaluable tool that you've had in order to get us where we are and to get us to the promised land at some point. Francine, I want you to once again reiterate to the people of Guam what you said last week, that the posture and the situation has greatly improved and that public health is absolutely, to the best of their ability, prioritizing schools for reviewing pre-inspections, dealing with when they're ready for inspections, giving recommendations if they do fail on how to move forward and address their issues. Can you tell the people of Guam that?
Thank you, Senator. When Public Law 37-4 passed last year, and we met with GDOE to try to coordinate these inspections to start because everybody's sanitary permit expired on June 30. And Attica being the first school inspected and failing inspection initially, there was this idea that we're miles apart in us trying to understand what we need, what both sides need to understand in their process and ours as well. Since the passage of Public Law 37, 32, 31, and the barrage that happened last year around July, we met again with GDOE. Every week I meet with Chris Anderson, And so we better understand each other's limitations and how soon it'll actually take GDOE to be ready to be inspected by us. The idea is GDOE is like, we're going to be slow and methodical so we don't cut any corners and we don't miss anything so we can pass inspection. And when our inspectors go out there, they get as far as they can. They make correction. They make all these demerits. They cite it. They say at the end of every day of the inspection, these are the problems. These are the demerits. Their facilities and maintenance staff is quick to respond. So when my inspectors come back the next day, it's corrected. If it can be corrected, it's corrected. What I will say is, in 1 year, because we failed 3 schools, 20 inspections were done, but actually 23 were done because 3 schools failed. In 1 year, with my limited staff and our other competing priorities, we were able to inspect 23 schools. Could we have been inspected more? Possibly, but there would be no fruitfulness for GDOE to fail an inspection, then to shuffle their kids to other learning alternatives in the middle of a school year, which, as you saw, LBJ and Timoning Elementary did. So this is a collaboration, is how I see it. It's a partnership. We want, we are regulatory arm, so we have limitations on how much we can do. I can't go over there and hold their hand because I'm the regulator. But at the same token, I can provide training. I can answer questions for interpretations, clarifications, and really that's what I see myself in our weekly meetings serve as. They tell us which schools are ready to go. We make that plan. We look at their variances. We see how we need to move forward. I would say 50% is a pretty good marker in 1 year. What is considered 20 years of negligence. And if we continue at the same speed that we continue, we more than likely will inspect all the other schools by the end of 24-25. But due to the urgency, that may have to change, and based on what the body decides, if the body decides anything, we're still going to inspect, we're still going to move forward, we're still going to do what we are charged to do.
Speaker, Dr. Wampat. What we're debating as well is the differences on how the bill originally introduced, which is basically primarily a proposal as to what we're doing. So I don't want anybody to be mistaken about the bill that passed last year. We're doing what we're trying to do here. Let's just call it for what it is. What's going to happen to this bill, I don't know, but the amendment that was debated of concern that I think kind of threw the kilter on this one, Dr. Wampat, is the issue with regard to the ad hoc committee and what it would mean to the ongoing inspections and whether that would have had any effect, because had we put that in there and it wasn't assembled, it wouldn't have mattered because it became part of law. And if you didn't assemble that and they didn't do the pre-inspection and become part of the whole responsibility, then essentially we would have passed a law that said, hurry up and wait. So my reason why I'm asking you this is because when the 14 points came out, you were instrumental and you were part of assembling a liaison to try to prevent legal action and to make sure that there was an office that was doing particularly, it just came to me a couple of days ago. I was like, wait a minute, that office of the Serrano, in order to try to avoid lawsuits and things like that, I looked down all of those committee members and everything else, and I said, this looks familiar. This is exactly the job of that liaison and that Serrano, was to mitigate those issues and to drive the mission internally to say, hey, we're falling behind here. We're going to get busted on these 14 points. So get to work and the like. And so I'm asking you, I understand that lasted for a little while. I think Mr. Dominic Talahi or somebody took it on in the beginning, but then it kind of fell by the wayside. Do you agree that basically that office already exists in terms of what it would do primarily, not for this situation per se, but because, I mean, we're looking probably staring down 2 weeks now. I don't know why, well, I may save that for a closing statement. But do you agree that that was the primary mission of that office, to have done what the ad hoc committee was asking for?
Thank you for that question, and you are correct. I was part of the legislature at the time when that Surahano position was recreated again, but in a different, with a different mission, other than actually getting all of the complaints from about the different departments, but this was going to be specific to just DOE. The position, though, the hiring of that position rests with the legislature. It always has been. And that part of the law hasn't changed. So you have the power and the authority to then vet any applicant who would like to be a Surahano, and that person actually works very closely with the department. They visit the schools, they take all the complaints, they follow through with what's not being done on 14 points. That's the specific reason for the hiring of the Surahano. It's unfortunate, you're right, that the position didn't continue after Attorney Dominic Terlahi has left that, position. So after this, maybe that is something you should consider, the legislature should consider filling that position.
Thank you, Speaker, because to me, whatever happens to this bill, if you're going to put that in, I just think that has to be a standing order. But if it's prior to any, with the timeline that we have, then we might as well just not pass the bill and let the process go through.
Senator, I sat here with all of you since last week, and I understand the request for 317, but you heard everything that I heard, and we're also hearing everything that this whole panel has actually proposed. And this is my opinion only, understand this, is that I have moved up from the ranks of being a classroom teacher, a counselor, school principal, and even as the acting superintendent of education. I was also the speaker of this body at one time. So I know a little bit about education and a little bit about the legislature. And honestly, to answer all of your questions, and I think everybody here has actually provided the answers, what needs to happen now, and please don't be offended, but what needs to happen here is that dismiss this panel and call quote, this is a new term, a caucus of the whole, because you're going to have to sit down here really and now work out the differences and do what's best for our school children. Because the more time we spend in here is lost time in the classroom. The board is ready to move forward with a procurement, emergency procurement. What they need now is to lift that threshold from 250,000 to whatever, whether it's 500,000 or 1 million. They should be able to, you guys should be able to decide that, so that then they can move their people. Because once they declare that emergency, don't forget, is that the clock starts ticking already, and we don't have any time to waste. Then you allow everybody else. Public health has a mandate, and they're here to follow their mandate. And I was saying this publicly, is that I may not agree 90% of the time with the AG, but this one time, when he says for you guys to go out there now and identify what's dangerous and what's not dangerous, totally, I agree. But that's only my opinion. And then I love the idea, yes. As a matter of fact, I will tell you, this discussion did happen, is the possibility of, yes, deputizing some people. It never went anywhere. Now it's brought up here. That's something to consider. But for all of these things, put a time certain You know, I thought it was 180 days because that's the contracts that are out. But now I heard yesterday that it might even go up to 10 months. So I don't have a magic number in terms of how do you want to sunset this. But because it's an emergency, you can do a lot of things in the emergency. But you tie this to a time frame as to when to start and when to end, that everybody must do their part. We're asking for hands-on, everybody hands-on from the government. Well, everybody in DOE has to be hands-on as well. And I have my own opinion about that in terms of what they should do and what they should not do. This is no time, I'm telling you, for anyone to be sitting back, relaxing, or taking trips for that matter, when the first priority will be our children, our school. We must make sure, because they deserve definitely much
Point of
better.
inquiry, Mr. Chair.
Madam Speaker, on your point of inquiry?
Yes, the Speaker Wampat said that the board can lift the caps on the emergency procurement, and I'd like to ask the board if they have that authority.
No, they don't. It has to be the legislature. The board can only grant a procurement
Right, because I thought you
emergency.
said that they should
No.
go back and do their, lift their, okay,
No,
thank
the
you.
threshold is $250,000.
Yeah, I agree.
That's all they can work with. So the power is in your hands.
General Moylan, you have white smoke this morning. So just a couple more questions, and then I agree with Speaker Wampat. We got to move on and get to work. General Moylan, you mentioned yesterday, and I just want to be clear because I want to be clear on what I'm going to close with. We cannot pass a law to try to change a different reality of what exists. And no matter how many amendments or whatever else we do, I mean, isn't this at this point in time an exercise in futility and just stick with the original law that came through and see this thing through and find out if there's any other pieces of legislation or any other list of things that we can do through the budget process to help this?
I believe that's accurate, Senator Duenas. The bill that's given to me, the bill number 317-37, that's not going to fix the problem of what's the government of Guam is currently facing.
And I want to be clear. I think everybody's trying their best. This bill was introduced because we did this last year. There was a timeline. If it's not useful and it's not effective and it's not legal, then let's move forward and get the work done. Mary Cotta, Dr. Cotta, yesterday there was a mention that Trades Academy has been working with Dr. Wampat and others in terms of their efforts. I know that you do a lot of technical work as well as you're famous for boot camps, and your boot camp individuals who get her done in a lot of different areas. Do you see a similar situation whereby you can utilize your resources to put more hands on deck of the already hands on deck?
Thank you, Senator, for recognizing the capacity that perhaps may exist at the Guam Community College. Yes, we do have boot camps that we've offered. As a matter of fact, yesterday was a happy day for me, waking up, recognizing that we just received a grant from Department of Interior to offer maintenance worker boot camps. And so we were just funded, yes, there's some provisions that we have to make, conditions in order to accept that award. But there's also the possibility, because, and Senator Sabina knows this, we do have students that are in the construction trade programs in each of the high schools. And if GDOE is identified as a work site for work experience, that can also serve as a opportunity for students to get hands-on. I mean, this is real stuff. And so we can activate, of course, high schools right now are not in session, so I don't have any high school students to offer. But we can see if we can take some of the construction courses that are currently, our post-secondary starts next week on Wednesday. So if we have post-secondary students that could perhaps do some of their coursework in the high schools, we just need to know what needs to be done and whether or not the materials are available, because we don't want to intersect with what has already been contracted for any of the refurbishments.
Yeah, and Dr. Wampat, can you add to that as well?
Yes. Of course, in working with Dr. Bert Johnston, he did say that there are 80 students that have gone through his construction core program. So those students are eager and wanting to take practice, put into practice what they have learned. I also want to let you know that at the time when I was in the department, we were talking about all this. Fernandez Davis from GURA reached out to me and also said that if you ever need help, I've got maintenance workers. So right now he has 23 maintenance workers who'd be willing to help. However, the only thing is because it is a federally funded program, the overtime would have to be paid by the Department of Education. But there are people already reaching out wanting to help, and those are the kind of skilled laborers that we need, that they need.
You know what I like about these students who are trained is that if they actually activate under a certain umbrella and they're doing repairs, they're going to become the police on the campus and say, don't break that because I fixed it. So it's a good proposal. You know, Mr. Chair, I know that I'll be taking the chair for you while you come to address the panel. But I want to just say, as I have this little bit of time left, you know, like I said, there's not 1 second, as far as I'm concerned, that's been wasted here. I think there's an opportunity to waste seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months going forward. Because I don't think we're going to pass a bill that nobody wants to be responsible for. Because I'm lining up with the general. I'm not going to vote for a bill that says, which we're really doing here, basically, is saying, the legislature, the senator said, open those schools. And I'm not raising my hand for that. So I'm not into passing something that's pretty and fun and pretty fun. We're going to pass something here on this floor. It's got to be something that's durable, that's legal, that's viable. Other than that, let's join these guys. Get out of this session and let's hit the schools. We're in budget session. We're in a time where we can be the most effective for the upcoming year for the Department of Education. Give them what they need. We're going to be in the committee for that. If we have to bring you guys back, we'll bring you back. What do you need? Let's get the job done. We're wasting time. You know, I just don't want to end up, you know, I'll give myself up. I do karaoke once in a while, but this is starting to remind me of Lionel Richie. I did my best, but I guess my best wasn't good enough. And we're back where we were before. Seems we're always changing. Here we go. Let's just get it done, you guys. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Duenas. Colleagues, as you know, the Guam Education Board is convening a special meeting at 1 p.m., and so we're going to recess to allow them to get some lunch before that meeting, and we'll come back at 4 o'clock, colleagues. So see you promptly at 4.